can't find a book on programming. I can't find a clear, direction. I can't find a YouTube video that has a solution to this problem. But when I look outside the domain of programming to these other different disciplines, suddenly those other things apply. Programming uses our mind so much, it's only natural we often consider ourselves a really high intelligence. But there's another trait that's even more valuable: wisdom. In this episode, I'd like to help you understand the difference between the two, the really big value in wisdom, and why learning to cultivate it can actually help you have a much more healthy and fulfilling career in tech. Here at Healthy Software Developer, I like to talk about 4 things: career progression, working healthy, finding meaning and purpose through your work, and escaping the corporate grind. This episode today is specifically to help you with working healthy, and I can't think of many things in my career that have impacted my ability to both be more effective and healthy than learning to acquire some level of wisdom. So let's start off by me just defining these 2 terms. I'm going to read them right off my notes here. Intelligence is the ability to learn, understand, and apply knowledge. So when you read a book, when you take a course, when you're mentored by someone, you can acquire knowledge that they have that's already fairly straightforward, or it's been agreed upon, or it's been documented. And even though you might not have that knowledge right away, once you acquire it, you can start to put it into practice, and it can improve your ability to do some skill. Wisdom, on the other hand, is knowing what to do when the rules don't apply. This often requires experience, intuition, sound judgment, and considering the ethical implications of the decisions that we make. So I want to give you a couple quick examples of how this manifested itself in my career before I give you some advice on how you can acquire wisdom for yourself. The first story is when I first read the book on continuous delivery. This was probably almost 15 years ago now, maybe about 15 years ago. It was a new concept in the industry, but that book, Continuous Delivery, written by Jez Humble and Dave Farley. Dave Farley has a YouTube channel here on YouTube called Continuous Delivery. It's really great. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out. But when I read that book, it synthesized a lot of experiences I'd had on software projects trying to deploy and manage releases of software in a way that really changed my career. And it took a lot of practice until I started to learn how to apply that well. But there was a whole body of knowledge in that book and a lot of other influencers and people out in the industry who had kind of experienced the same thing, that by learning from them and by reading that book, I was able to then apply that skill on my projects. An example, though, of wisdom would be hitting much closer to home. If you've seen the episode or listened to it as a podcast that I did about my burnout situation, when I was coming out of my severe career burnout, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should get a job out of the tech industry. I didn't know if I should take a break for 2 years. I didn't know if I should sell all my stocks. I had all this urgency because I had health problems, mental health problems. I had sleep problems. And though I would meet with people from my church and I would ask them what they thought I should do, and I would ask my friends and colleagues what they thought I should do, nobody really could tell me the answer. And so I started to realize that I had giant gaps in my own self-awareness and my life experience where I couldn't make a wise decision. I needed to make a decision where there were no simple rules that anybody could give me. I had a lot of options in front of me, and there was no roadmap. There was no book of instructions that could say, Jamie Edwards, you in this exact circumstance in your career, this is the correct decision to make. So you'll know when you're in a situation where you're having to either make a intelligent, informed decision or a wise decision when the decision you're about to make, you got the answer from a single source that's usually based on knowledge or intelligence, versus when you made a decision often based on your own personal experience or a breadth of experiences. And I'm going to talk about that as the episode goes on, from multiple sources. So first, let's talk about how tech jobs specifically often confuse intelligence with wisdom and how that sort of manifests itself in our industry. First, we often equate problem solving with broad insight. What the heck does that mean? Well, if we meet someone, let's say, who is really skilled at Node.js or React or business intelligence or data science, and they have deep knowledge and they can solve a lot of problems, we'll often think that same person, because they're so skilled at that one discipline, is also skilled at other things. And you have seen this in the public square as well, when there's, let's say, a celebrity actor who has won awards for movies. And then you start to see them in ads for political views they have, or some health stance that they think you should take. And so we often, I think, conflate intelligence with wisdom when we look at a person who's been successful in one aspect of life or our career, or in this case, let's say tech, and we think that because they're so good at that one thing, we can trust them to help us make wise decisions in others. The second way that we often confuse intelligence with wisdom in our industry is we just prioritize speed over sustainability. What I mean by this is, so often on projects, so often in my life, so often in our career and at companies, we see a short-term benefit and we go towards it immediately because it solves the problem that's sitting right in front of our face. But we don't step back and think, when we make this decision, is this going to be good in the long run, even the midterm run often. So when you're on tech projects and you're trying to make a wise decision, just be wary. I'm going to talk quite a bit about this more as the episode goes on, that there's always going to be a temptation for us to choose the quick and easy, right in front of our, face path, when that may be the complete wrong path. And sometimes the worst decisions I've made in my career were when I made a decision based on a lot of information that was available to me, but I was only looking forward like a month or 3 months or maybe a year in advance of the decision that I needed to make. I wasn't looking for the entire, let's say, lifetime of the project or product or my company I worked for when I made the decision. And the third way we often confuse intelligence with wisdom in the tech industry is we prioritize specialization versus having a kind of bigger picture, more holistic understanding of issues. This is kind of related to the first point I made, but often we just focus completely on, a specific, let's say, skill. For example, as programmers, if we consider ourselves like a Java developer or a Rust developer or JavaScript developer, we think that by being really experienced with that one technology, that makes us experienced in programming in general. And often also we think just if we know a bunch of programming languages, that makes us effective with software development as a whole. And I think if you've been in this industry for a while, that to develop and manage and release a software product involves product management, UX potentially, usability testing, unit testing and integration testing. Again, you might be doing TDD, but there's a bunch of testing involved. There's architecture, there's programming, there's release management, configuration management. I mean, the list goes on. There's a lot of different perspectives that you can look at software development from. And so in our industry, we tend to silo people and we want to sort of put them in a box and say, you're really deep with this skill. That's all we want you to do. And I think a mistake we often make is we choose to go along with that when really some of the biggest value that I've gotten out of my career is when I took a step back and I started to broaden my view and learn some things that were outside of really what the company and sort of the industry's view of a programmer expected me to constrain myself to. So how is ignoring wisdom in the tech industry hurting us? What's really the problem if we aren't more wise in the first place? Well, first of all, and you're probably very familiar with this, there are real ethical implications when we don't make wise decisions. One of the most current, right in your face examples of this is artificial intelligence. There are companies who stand to make billions of dollars off the development of AI. But those developments also come with equivalent risks. And they may tell you that, the risks are small and they know, they've done a whole bunch of analysis on what kind of problems with AI are going to emerge. But nobody really knows for sure. If you even just look back, let's say 20 years at when GMO or genetically modified foods first came onto the market, they were telling us the same thing then. It's safe, it's more effective, it'll feed more people. Little did we know that our bodies were going to react to genetically modified foods and create a lot of sickness that we've experienced. Another way you've probably experienced the ethical consequences in tech of decisions that weren't very wise because they weren't considering the ethical considerations is social media. I mean, you can go find probably thousands at this point of articles and YouTube videos talking about actual real research that's been done about the damaging effect of social media on our peace, our, ability to feel okay about ourselves, our ability to stay motivated, and how bad of a comparison situation it creates and how that ruins our contentment. And yet we all use it. The companies that develop those technologies just keep marching on. And finally, you probably are well aware of the privacy decisions that have been made in technology. One of the most famous is when Edward Snowden, for example, came forth with a lot of things that the US government was doing that were really completely unconstitutional. And those were, again, decisions that the government made for reasons that they thought were good, that maybe were good in the short term. But, you may not agree with me about this, but, when you lose your privacy over time, there are things that people in power who don't care about you as much as you might hope can use that withdrawal of privacy against you for. So, my main point with this is just when we lack in wisdom, when we don't consider the ethical implications of decisions we're going to make on our career, and this might sound kind of big picture, and you're going to have to kind of bring this down into your project. You make decisions that are going to solve a problem that's right in front of you, but often they can create bigger problems in the long run. And that's really the broader part, the second point here of how ethical considerations play themselves out in ways that hurt people, is just choosing to prioritize short-term versus long-term decisions and not thinking through the implications fully. I mean, for example, every time we automate work, we're putting people out of a job. When a company merges two companies that used to compete with each other, that destroys innovation. You probably know that when there's a market, let's say a photography software market, and there's 5 or 10 companies, and they're all coming to market with different products and different solutions, they all have to keep their competition up. That results in innovation and in a better experience, in progress for users. But when those companies consolidate, there's not as much motivation for them to compete. And ultimately, they're then able to raise prices, and you don't really get any new features. So let's get something positive out of this episode. What are some ways you can be a wiser technologist? Well, first, you can expand your breadth of knowledge. I think some of the most intelligent people that I've met that don't make wise decisions are people who invest way too heavily in one skill or one niche thing, and they never step outside to learn anything different. When I was a software developer and I mostly just wanted to write code, that was my favorite thing to do. I would get so frustrated when the direction of the product would change. Management wanted to make a different decision. The company went a different direction, and I didn't understand why. And it was partially because a lot of the signs that those things were going to happen were right in front of my face, but I didn't have the wisdom to see them because I'd chosen to isolate myself from all the other aspects of a typical software business. So if you want to make wise decisions and you want to cultivate and have some wisdom, and that's going to let you see things coming down the, in the future more easily. And it's going to help you make better decisions when there's not an easy rule about which way to go. Consider learning things outside your core skill set. And I don't just mean, you're a Java developer and you want to learn Node, or you're a Node developer and you want to learn Rust. I mean, you're a developer, learn about product management some. If you're a product manager, learn about engineering a little bit. Go outside the kind of strictly bound roles that corporate America or corporate culture in first world countries tends to put us in, and expose yourself to different things. I mean, in most universities, when you go to college, for example, assuming you're not going to like a trade school, you're paying a lot for classes that are not directly related to your, eventual thing that you're going to do. If you go to college, let's say in the United States, to be a doctor, there's a whole bunch of classes you're going to take that don't necessarily directly relate to being a doctor. And I'll leave aside the issue that the costs of college have become ridiculous and all the drama beyond that. That's for another episode. But a benefit to that, assuming that it's still cost effective or affordable for what you're trying to do, is a person enters the workforce and they haven't just learned just to do the skills they need to be a doctor. They've maybe understood social issues. They've understood humanitarian issues, economic issues, other things that maybe have some crossover to being a doctor and effectively helping people. The second way you can be a wiser technologist and make decisions not just based on knowledge that you acquire, but on the experience of others and help you make decisions where the rules don't apply, is get yourself a mentor. Now, the simplest example of this is if you're on a project or at a company. If you see someone, I'll give you an example. When I joined my first consulting company, this was about 15 years ago, I realized I had hopefully at least a little bit of self-awareness to know, hey, I just joined a consulting company. I may have been, in software development for 12 years at that point, but I don't know how to consult. And I looked around and tried to figure out who are the good consultants here. Now, again, I didn't even know what makes a good consultant, but I just kind of had to, on gut feel, sort of guess based on how, many people were asking that person questions and how, effective they were and maybe what their title were. And I found a certain man that I let him know I wanted to learn from him. And over, the 10 years that I was with that company, through many, many different software projects, he was someone I was always able to go back to whenever I got stuck, whenever I needed some perspective. We all have big blind spots in our lives. If you have, again, any sense of maturity and self-awareness, you'll admit this. I have all kinds of blind spots where I just don't see my limitations. And if you never do anything about that, you just kind of continue through your career in the danger of making decisions uninformed because you have those blind spots. But if you get a mentor, one of their biggest, most valuable things is not just to teach you new skills. It's also to make you aware of things that you just don't see about your own deficiencies. The third way you can be a more wise technologist is to just reflect and be more mindful. What does this really look like? First of all, take more time to make decisions. If you're slamming coffee all day, every time that you work, it's accelerating and creating anxiety in you that's forcing you to feel like you need to make decisions as quickly as possible. And while with the fast-paced nature that we've all grown accustomed to in tech, there is pressure. We can't just sit around and think forever. You know that at least programming, for example, is a creative activity. 2, 3, 4 different programmers can be handed the same exact set of requirements, and they have different levels of effectiveness at building the software. And often it's the one who's most well rested or takes a little bit of time first to really look at the problem, step back, think about it, not just jump into estimating it or jump into building it, but think a little bigger picture. What am I about to build? What are some of the issues I might run into? How should I approach building this? If you take a little bit more time and step back before you make a decision, there's probably a much better chance that you're going to draw from a wider set of experiences. And again, maybe even things outside of software development to help you make a better decision. The other aspect of this reflecting on, what you're about to do and making mindful decisions, though, too, is to seek forms of truth outside just the discipline that you're dealing with. So again, if you're in product management and you always go to the key influential people that are well known in product management, you're going to get somewhat of a myopic view. If you go instead, if you're a developer and you're always going to this top 3 or 4 YouTubers, me or other big YouTubers on YouTube, and those are the only people that you're looking to for, knowledge and decisions, you're limiting yourself quite a bit. And, that's part of the reason why I eventually came to faith in Christ. Talked about that in my burnout episode, and that, I read the Bible is not specific to programming. It's not specific to work. It's not specific to life. It's just kind of generalized universal knowledge that, in my experience, applies to software development and career and life and a lot of different things. So having, a breadth of sources that you can go to for information, and also having, forms of truth that kind of trump other things. For example, if you don't have any code of ethics, like a set of principles that you say, I will do this, but I will not do that, you can get yourself into situations where your company's pressuring you to do things that you really shouldn't do. They're not right for you. They're not right, let's say, for your family. But if you don't have any agreed principles, you're kind of left open to being manipulated into doing, whatever the hell people want you to do. Again, another reason I read the Bible is it's a set of ethics that I've just decided for myself. I'm going to do my best to follow these ethics and these rules. And if I get on a software project, or I'm working with a client, or I'm about to make a decision about even the YouTube channel, if that decision goes against what the Bible says, in my case, I do my best to not do it. The fourth way you can be a much wiser technologist is to seek the counsel of generalists over specialists. It's very tempting if you're trying to do something like, for example, in my case, when I'm trying to build a business to help people, I'm doing career coaching, I'm creating courses, I'm doing all these things with YouTube to try to reach you and help you. It's very tempting for me to just go find, let me find a specialist just in YouTube videos, and let me find a specialist just in marketing, and just in sales, and just in coaching. And while those things are great, people who have generalized knowledge about business, I've found at least, are where I've gotten some of my biggest insights and breakthroughs in my life. And I think if you're a software developer and you want to advance in your career, looking for people that have not just had experience with programming, but maybe they were a developer and they got into product management, or they were a developer and they got into consulting like I have, or, a variety of other experiences they've had. There's a lot of crossover in concepts between different, disciplines and different job roles. And a person who's experienced a variety of those roles often, not always, but often will have a breadth of experience, and they can draw from that breadth of experience to make decisions that, again, the rules within programming may not be clear. I can't find a book on programming. I can't find a clear, direction. I can't find a YouTube video that has a solution to this problem. But when I look outside the domain of programming to these other different disciplines, suddenly those other things apply. And, when I started this channel, this show, honestly, I approached it from the exact same way. I was like, I want to help people with their career in software development, but I don't want to just teach them the typical knowledge about software development, because that's not where I got my biggest insights. Where I got my biggest insights were through applying like the personal development industry to software development, and psychology to software development, and my spirituality, Christianity to software development. These are areas where I felt like I was able to come up with some things that might really help you, that I don't want to say they're uncommon knowledge, but maybe they're just not talked about as much. And this is why I have the career guide that I've put out there. You've probably heard of this. If not, grab it. There's a link in the description. Is I try to just capture some basic stuff that we don't talk about in the industry as much, because we get so hung up in progression, and coding. And we don't really step back to think about, okay, let me look at the big picture of my life and career and where I'm headed. I try to throw that into a short ebook as something to really help you. And the fifth way you can hopefully be an even wiser technologist than you hopefully already are today is to engage with non-technical communities. Hey, it's one thing to go out and search for an influencer online, or watch my YouTube videos, or, go out on Twitter and follow someone, or even read someone's book. And I think, the wealth of information available to us today is so awesome. I would have loved this when I was coming up very early in my career. The internet was still somewhat new then and nowhere near as saturated and developed and, full of information as it is today. But this is my experience. It is no substitute for being part of a group of people who in person, or at least through, let's say Discord or some way that people can easily collaborate quickly. It's no substitute for a community of people that are kind of hashing out an idea or talking about an issue together. And an evidence of that is just, I love your comments on my videos. They really create a lot of ideas for new episodes for me. They show me where you're headed. They show me my own blind spots. There have been times I've made a statement and you've asked me some questions about it, and it's really forced me to think about, how do I articulate this better? I didn't probably go into enough detail, or maybe I even misspoke, or maybe what I said doesn't make sense in some context and I need to explain myself better. But, being part of a community when you're either bringing forth new ideas or you're just learning a whole bunch of new skills, if you want to make decisions in your career where there's no clear path forward, you might be on a project right now and there's politics between you and a scrum master, or there's a decision that you could join this team or stay with the one you're with. I coach people on those decisions, but coaching, when I help them, we're figuring it out together. It's a collaborative activity. I'm not just sitting there going, well, I'm Jamie Edwards and I have experience and here's what you should do. I'm not them, but they equally are like, I've tried making this decision myself. I can't quite figure it out. And they've had the humility to bring me in as an advocate for them to help them out. So, if you're in a situation where you're really stuck and you're trying to make a wise decision and there doesn't seem to be a clear path forward, I really hope the stuff I shared with you today might be somewhat helpful. So share with me, what are some situations you've been in where there hasn't been a clear path forward? And what are some things that you did to get clarity and gain wisdom? What are some stories you might have of people who were really smart and had high intelligence, but you saw them make really foolish decisions? And if you want a giant example of that, again, watch my burnout episode again. But until next time, thanks.